So if all goes well, we're going to do 2 examples, starting with a simpler one and moving to a slightly more complicated one of a real live RESTful URI call that I'm going to make right before your eyes. And I'm going to hope that maybe on the video we'll blur out my API key so that you all don't use it. But it's free, so it doesn't matter. So please don't use my API key. If you want to replay the examples, get your own darn key. But we're going to use the MovieDB, which is essentially an open movie database that is similar in spirit to IMDb. It does a lot of the same things, but it has an open API that anybody can use. And if we're going to take a look at the documentation page in a moment. Reading APIs as documentation is sort of a life skill, so we'll show you how to do that. But as we will see on the documentation page, the API endpoint, meaning every microservice call we make to this API, is going to start with this partial URL. The 3 means we're using version 3 of the API. As APIs evolve, there's other ways to specify which version you're using, but obviously it's important that the server and the client agree, because sometimes the ways the API calls are done might change from one version to another. So we're going to take a look at the developer page in just a moment, and we're going to do a very simple API call to get details about a movie. So let's quickly take a look at what the developer page shows. So if I look at the API reference for the MovieDB, by the way, you can see that I'm actually logged in. This is important because I had to register for an API key. It's free, but it's what allows me to make calls against the service. And there's this API developer docs has a very nice interface where it can essentially construct the code for you to do an API call. And we're going to use that to do our live example. So if I go to the API reference, pick a language. Well, we're going to use Shell for now, but in a little bit, I'm going to show you what happens if we chose, for example, Ruby as the language. Authenticate. How do we authenticate? Well, if I scroll way back to the beginning of this field, this is my personal access token. You too can have a personal access token. Just go to tmdb.org and sign up for one. But we somehow have to include it as part of every request. And if we look at sort of a little simple example down here where they're using curl, which is what we're going to use, it looks like they're adding a header called authorization. And the authorization header has to contain the word bearer followed by the API key of whoever is making the call. So every API call we're going to do is going to have to include that as a header. Now, here's the neat thing. Suppose I go down to, here's all the different resources and things you can do with the MovieDB. I'm going to skip down to movies. And in particular, how to get the details of a movie, right? And remember that when we, there we go. You can see a few of the responses or the requests that I've done recently. Remember that if you look at the curl code that's been helpfully constructed for us over here to do an example request for getting movie details, or let me see if I can make that any bigger. We'll do that. No harm done. So the developer site has this really nice interface where for a particular API request, like this one, movie/movie ID, it's showing me the actual curl command line that I would use to try this request from my own command line. And look, it has helpfully included the authorization header, and it has put in my personal API key. So if we look down at this documentation, what parameters are in the path params? Remember, the path is the part of the URI that immediately follows the host name and port. And it's saying that I have to give a integer specifying the movie ID that I want to get details for. Because I have practiced this demo, I have a particular movie in mind. It is movie ID number 6, which is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, the best science fiction movie ever made. And you can see that once I type a number in here, look, what used to be movie ID in here, let's get rid of the number so you can see the difference. Okay, movie/movie ID, and as soon as I type a number, movie ID gets replaced with that actual value. So as I sort of type the different parameters that I want to try my API call, it's modifying the curl command line that I have to type. In fact, I can look further and say there's an optional query parameter. This is the stuff after the question mark, the key value pairs, that says optionally the language that you want to receive your reply in. I'm just going to blank this out for simplicity's sake. And notice that as I blank it out, that parameter now got removed from the URI. And that's okay because it says that this is an optional parameter. So I now have a query string in curl. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to my terminal. There we go. And now we'll pipe this through JQ. So if I had called the MovieDB API from someplace within a web page of my own app, this is the data structure I would get back. Every major language, and especially JavaScript, can sort of dereference the fields of this object and then do whatever it wants with the contents of each of those. So what were sort of the key things to notice here in the original curl command? I told it what kind of request it is. I told it the URL. I told it the necessary header to authenticate my request, which, by the way, we can experiment with what would happen if I left some of these things out. If I copy this one more time, and this time I'm going to, before pasting it into my command line, I'm going to paste it into an editor, and I'm going to get rid of the authorization header. And now I'll take the remaining command and I'll paste that instead. And I'll pipe the output to JQ so that it's pretty. Invalid API key. Did I see an HTTP error? Well, I didn't ask to look at the headers. So if I were debugging and I'm trying to figure out why can I not get this test command to work, a thing I might do is I might add the -D flag, which means also show me the headers, try my request again, there. And when we look at the headers, we could see the server responded with HTTP version 2, but the status code is no longer in the 200 family. The 200 family is happy. 400 family means not allowed in some way. Like the thing you asked for makes sense, but you're not allowed to do it. And then in that case, if I look at the actual data structure that was returned, I can see the human readable message that says invalid API key. So that's a really simple example of a request. And we can do a little more complex example now that we have that one under our belts.